Welcome. Tonight, as you close your eyes and let the weight of the day slip quietly from your shoulders, you've arrived at a space meant for stillness. This is a time where nothing is demanded of you and nothing needs to be accomplished. Only a gentle drifting, a slow unfolding of thought, and the ease of being carried along by words. I'm grateful you've chosen to be here. If you'd like these quiet journeys to continue, consider subscribing. But there is no pressure, only gratitude that you are listening now. Allow yourself to settle into comfort. Find the rhythm of your breath, the steady rise and fall, as if you were rocking on a quiet tide. Let your thoughts grow lighter, as if each one were a feather released into a soft evening breeze. The pace will be slow, and if your mind drifts, that is not a problem. It is welcome. The story will remain here, waiting patiently, as stories always do. Imagine, for a moment, that the universe is not an endless stage of triumphs, but instead a great library filled with forgotten volumes. Each shelf holds the record of worlds that began with promise, but faltered. Some were too warm, wrapped in blankets too thick, until their seas turned to vapor. Others were too cold, abandoned to silence, where rivers froze into memory and never returned. Perhaps most never became more than barren rock, circling their stars in quiet obscurity. If Earth is the story you know, the story you walk upon each day, could it be only one survivor among many lost chapters? It is a gentle question, but a vast one. What if Earth is not the miracle we like to imagine? Not the single bright spark in a dark cosmos, but simply a world that happened to last a little longer than the rest? And what if it isn't even the final word, but only a pause, a momentary success before it too is shelved alongside countless failed companions? The wonder lies not in certainty, but in allowing the question to breathe. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was timing. Maybe it was nothing more than the roll of cosmic dice that placed Earth just far enough, yet not too far, from its star. Maybe it was the stirring of its molten heart, spinning magnetic fields that sheltered the air. Maybe it was water, falling from comets, or bubbling from stone that pooled and lingered long enough for chemistry to play. Maybe it was all of these things, or none of them. Maybe it was something we cannot yet name. And maybe it wasn't so extraordinary at all. Maybe most stars nurture worlds like this, and we are not rare, but one among multitudes. Maybe other Earths once bloomed with oceans and forests and skies as blue as ours, and maybe they fell silent long ago. If that is true, their traces lie somewhere in the quiet dark, erased or hidden, waiting for eyes that may never come. Time is not gentle with worlds. It erases as much as it creates. Oceans wear down mountains. Winds sand away monuments of stone. Even on Earth, our own story is written in disappearing ink. Layers of rock crumbling, fossils dissolving, entire ages compressed into thin, bright lines that only the patient eye can still read. If the Earth itself forgets, how many other worlds have already vanished from memory, leaving nothing but the silence of space to mark that they ever were? And so we begin our wandering tonight, not in search of hard answers, but in a spirit of quiet exploration. We will drift from world to world, from Venus wrapped in her furnace skies to Mars whispering of rivers long gone. We will pause on frozen moons and on exoplanets that circle distant stars, imagining the fates they met, Along the way, we will turn our gaze inward too, toward Earth itself, not as a perfect jewel, but as a survivor that has stumbled, frozen, burned, and endured. If your mind drifts as we travel, let it. You can always return, or simply float among the echoes of the words. Like a current in a wide ocean, the story will carry you where it wishes, and you are free to follow or to rest in stillness. This is not a journey of urgency. It is a journey of wonder. So let us step softly into it, with the patience of starlight and the calm of drifting clouds. We will turn the first page of this cosmic library together and wonder at what lies between the lines. And as we do, remember, Earth is only one chapter, perhaps one of many, perhaps one of few. Ahead, the question waits. What if our world is not the exception, but the rare survivor of a universe filled with quiet failures? Now, let us drift further. What if the story we tell ourselves about Earth is only half the truth? So often, we imagine our world as the rare jewel in a dark and empty sea, the improbable haven that shines alone against the odds. Yet, what if that picture is inverted? What if survival is not the common path, but the rare exception? What if Earth is not the singular marvel, but merely one survivor in a universe filled with forgotten attempts, failed beginnings, and silent endings? The question lingers like a quiet echo. It asks us to step back from the comfort of uniqueness, to loosen our grip on the idea of specialness, and instead to see Earth as one story written among billions. This does not diminish its beauty. If anything, it magnifies it. For if survival is rare, then every wave that breaks upon a shore, every breath that fills your lungs, is evidence of a miracle that almost did not happen. Imagine for a moment that you are walking through a forest. You see a single flower blooming at the edge of a clearing, and you might think it is the only one of its kind. But if you could look back across the whole forest, you might notice countless buds that never opened, seeds that fell but never took root, blossoms that came and withered too soon. Earth may be that lone flower in your clearing, a survivor, yes, but only one among countless seeds scattered across the cosmos, most of which never bloomed. Perhaps this is the true balance of things. Not that life arises wherever it can, but that failure is the more natural outcome. Planets forming too close to their star, scorched before they even begin. Others forming too far, locked in cold before chemistry can stir. Some worlds swirling with promise, but lacking the right balance of elements, or losing their fragile atmospheres to the violence of solar winds. From a distance, each might look like a candidate for wonder, but when the story unfolds, most chapters end in silence. It is humbling to think of it this way. Earth is not the center stage, but one voice in a vast chorus, most of which never sang for long. Cosmic humility asks us to remember that our survival does not mean inevitability. It does not guarantee permanence. It only means that, for reasons still half hidden, our planet endured where many others could not. And yet, that fragility is not cause for despair. It is cause for awe. For if life is rare, then its appearance here is all the more precious. Worlds usually falter. Then the one that lasted is a wonder worth treasuring. The blue of the oceans, the whisper of leaves in wind, the slow turning of the seasons, all of these are not ordinary at all, but extraordinary, precisely because they are exceptions carved out of an endless sea of failure. The universe itself might be thought of as an experiment without end. Stars are the laboratories, planets the vessels, time the patient hand that waits to see what will happen. Each world is a trial. Some end in fire, some in ice, some in emptiness. Most yield nothing at all. And yet, in this quiet scattering of chances, Earth emerged as one where life not only began, but persisted. Our story is not the only possible one, but it may be among the rarest. To frame the cosmos this way is to soften the arrogance of thinking we are alone or central. Instead, we can see ourselves as part of a much larger, slower unfolding. Each failure teaches something. Each silence reminds us how easily existence can be erased. Each survivor, however few, offers a glimpse into what might yet be possible elsewhere. So perhaps Earth is not the jewel it believes itself to be, but a survivor's relic, shining for a while in the long experiment of the stars. To hold this, thought is not to feel small, but to feel part of a vast and humbling beauty. We live within a rare pause in the silence, a moment where the universe tried, and for now, succeeded. And as we drift deeper into this wondering, we can begin to ask, what shapes this experiment? What are the balances that worlds must hold to sustain their fragile promise? And how often do those balances tip, turning a hopeful beginning into a quiet end? Now, let us turn gently toward the way worlds are born and how delicate their first steps can be. In the beginning, before a world takes shape, there is only a drifting cloud, dust and gas scattered like fine ash across the canvas of a galaxy, waiting to be gathered. These clouds are vast beyond comprehension, so wide that light itself takes years to cross them. Within their folds lies the raw material of stars and planets, the ancient remains of previous generations of suns that lived, burned, and ended. In this way, every new world begins as a page, written with recycled ink, the fragments of older stories becoming the letters of a new one. Imagine this cloud not as chaos, but as a slow-breathing nursery. Within it, grains of dust cling together, pulled by forces so faint we can barely name them. A single grain is joined by another, then another, until the weight becomes enough for gravity to stir. Gravity is the quiet sculptor, the unseen hand that gathers and presses, coaxing the scattered into the whole. Over millions of years, what was once a drifting mist becomes a spinning disk, a luminous wheel around a newborn star. And within that disk, tiny seeds of planets begin to grow. The process is patient, almost impossibly so. Pebbles become boulders, boulders become mountain-sized fragments. Fragments collide to form protoplanets. Each collision is violent, each impact reshaping the surface, yet out of destruction comes coherence. The sculptor works not with care, but with inevitability. Gravity pulling, binding, reshaping, until a rough sphere emerges. This is the embryo of a world, still molten, still fragile, still uncertain of its fate. We might think of these newborn planets as fragile works in progress, each one a draft in the universe's long composition. Some drafts will never be completed, torn apart by collisions, swallowed by larger neighbors, or flung into the cold dark between stars. Others will settle into orbits that are unstable, wandering too close to their star or drifting too far away. The ones that remain must then face the long challenge of cooling, of gathering an atmosphere, of holding on to the delicate balance that might one day permit water, chemistry, and perhaps life. It is tempting to see Earth as inevitable, as though the sculptor was always guiding toward this outcome. But beginnings do not carry guarantees. The same sculpting hand that formed Earth also formed Venus and Mars, each starting with promise, each diverging into silence or fire. This is why the birth of planets is best understood not as destiny, but as possibility. A world's first breath is only an opening note, not the full song. If you could stand at the edge of a stellar nursery and watch a solar system forming, it would not be like fireworks or sudden creation. It would be more like a slow dance, barely visible, a shifting of light and shadow that takes shape only when seen across eons. The dust glimmers, the gas swirls, and in the center a star burns brighter, feeding the process. Around it, in silence, worlds are being written, and yet, not every draft will last long enough to tell a story. Some planets will remain barren rock, locked in orbits too hostile for change. Some will lose their thin beginnings of atmosphere to the constant wind of their sun. Some may form with promising chemistry, only to cool too quickly, their cores solidifying, their magnetic shields failing, their skies stripped bare. Perhaps the majority of worlds never progress beyond this stage. Fragile beginnings that end before they can truly begin. It is this fragility that makes Earth's endurance remarkable. From the same dust and gas, sculpted by the same patient. Gravity. Earth emerged not just as a sphere of stone, but as a place where water gathered, where chemistry sparked, where life one day appeared. It is a story that could so easily have been cut short, an unfinished draft placed back on the shelf. As we drift through this thought, let it remind us that every beginning carries both hope and risk. The nursery of worlds is filled not with certainty, but with attempts. And though Earth's attempt succeeded, many others faltered, fading into silence before their songs could be heard. And so, we turn now toward that fragile balance. The conditions that make a planet not just possible, but habitable. For to begin is one thing, to endure is another. Every newborn planet drifts into its orbit like a child finding a seat in a vast classroom of stars. Some seats are too close to the fire, where heat scorches away any chance of oceans or air. Some are too far back, lost in the cold shadow, where water freezes into permanent silence. But a few settle in a middle place, a region sometimes called the Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, not too cold, but just right for liquid water to flow. This gentle metaphor captures more than warmth. It captures the delicate rhythm of life itself. For a planet to invite life, temperature alone is not enough. It needs water in motion, not locked in ice or vanished into vapor. It needs chemistry that can mingle in liquid, forming bonds, breaking them, and reforming again. It needs an atmosphere thick enough to cradle, but not so heavy that it smothers. Too much carbon, and the air becomes a furnace. Too little, and warmth slips away into space. The line between thriving and failing is so thin it might be compared to the surface of a bubble, shimmering, fragile, always in danger of breaking. Earth, by some mixture of chance and circumstance, found itself balanced on that bubble. Its orbit lies at a distance where oceans can swell and recede, where rain can fall, where clouds can gather and drift. Its tilted axis ensures seasons, gentle cycles of change rather than locked monotony. Its atmosphere is a soft blanket, neither too heavy nor too thin, holding heat, shielding against radiation, and carrying the breath of forests and seas. Each of these elements could so easily have slipped in another direction, and Earth would have joined the long list of failed worlds. Timing matters too. The sun has not always been what it is now. In its early years, it burned fainter, dimmer. A planet too close might have roasted, while one too far would have remained frozen. But Earth's conditions shifted in harmony. Greenhouse gases warmed its early oceans when the sun was young. Later, as the sun brightened, Earth's carbon cycles adjusted, drawing down the heat just enough to prevent a runaway fire. It is as if the planet has walked a tightrope, leaning sometimes to one side, sometimes to the other, but always finding its balance before tumbling. Consider Venus, so close to us, nearly Earth's twin in size and composition. A few small shifts, a slightly thicker atmosphere, a little too much carbon dioxide, tilted its balance irreversibly. What could have been oceans became steam. What could have been clouds of water became veils of acid. Or think of Mars, smaller and farther away, losing its warmth too quickly, its atmosphere too thin to hold the breath of rivers. Both began as candidates, both faltered, leaving Earth to walk alone on the narrow path of habitability. It is not that Earth was chosen, it is that Earth endured, for reasons still partly hidden. Perhaps it was luck, perhaps a series of self-correcting feedbacks, perhaps simply timing. Whatever the reason, the balance held, long enough for chemistry to stir into biology, long enough for biology to grow into forests, seas, and eventually us. And yet, when we think of this balance, it is worth remembering how many worlds fall outside it. Across the galaxy, billions of planets whirl in orbits too harsh for life as we know it. Some are giant spheres of gas with no surface at all. Some are locked in eternal daylight on one side and eternal night on the other. Some are seared by their suns until rocks themselves become molten, rivers of lava replacing rivers of water. Others are abandoned in darkness, drifting without a star, frozen to their cores. The odds seem heavy against survival. Earth is not proof that life is common, but proof that life is possible. That fragile possibility is enough to inspire awe. But it is also enough to remind us how unusual our world may be. As you rest, imagine Earth holding its place in orbit, like a dancer circling the sun at just the right distance, neither rushing too close nor slipping too far. Every step of that dance matters. Every sway could have ended it. And yet, the dance continues. But what of the others? What of the countless worlds that could not keep their balance, that slipped, that fell, that froze, or burned, or remained barren? If Earth holds the line, how many others have already vanished into silence? Let us drift into that question and consider the ways in which a world can fail. Take a moment now, before we wander further, to simply breathe. The story we are telling is not one that must be hurried, nor one that asks you to hold on tightly. It can flow around you, like water, passing through your fingers, patient and unhurried. If you are drifting, if your thoughts are already wandering into dreams, that is perfectly fine. The story will wait. It is a companion, not a demand. You may return to it at any time, or allow it to drift into the background, a gentle tide carrying you toward rest. Let us rest together for a moment in this thought. Some worlds succeed. Many do not. Some begin with promise, with oceans waiting to rise and atmospheres waiting to form, and they stumble into silence before the story can unfold. Some endure a while, carrying rivers and winds across their surfaces before slipping into fire or frost. Some, perhaps, never stood a chance at all. Only a fraction continue long enough for life to breathe upon them. And even then, survival is never assured. This rhythm is worth repeating, like the slow tolling of a distant bell. Some worlds succeed, many do not. In the vast halls of the Iuhu universe, silence outnumbers song. Failed worlds filled the shelves of the cosmic library, each a volume cut short, each a story that almost was. Yet within this library, Earth sits open, its pages still being written, its ink still fresh. Consider the fragility of this. How remarkable it is that you are listening now, alive in this rare interval where Earth's balance holds. It did not have to be so. If our planet had shifted slightly closer or slightly farther, perhaps we would not be here. If its air had thickened just a little, or thinned just a little, perhaps the seas would be empty of life. The margin is narrow, and yet here we are, witnesses to a fragile success among countless failures. It is humbling, but also comforting, to see Earth not as inevitable, but as precious. For what is rare becomes all the more beautiful. A flower, blooming in every field, may go unnoticed, but a single blossom in a barren place invites reverence. Earth is that blossom, shining for a moment in the dark meadow of space. If your eyes grow heavy as you listen, you may let them close. You need not hold on to each word. The story is vast, and like the stars themselves, it will continue whether you are awake or in dreams. Perhaps the best way to hear it is half awake, in that quiet state where words become images, and images dissolve into drifting thoughts. And as you drift, carry this refrain with you. Some worlds succeed, many do not. Earth is one of the survivors, and in that survival lies the wonder of all that we know. From here, we will turn more deeply into that truth. We will step from the nursery of beginnings into the graveyards of endings. We will ask, in how many ways can a world falter? What paths lead to silence, and what scars remain as their final signatures? These are the lessons the failed worlds can offer us, quiet guides in understanding the delicate threads that hold our own world together. But for now, let the pace soften. Let the thought rest. Some worlds succeed, many do not. And Earth, for now, continues. Now, let us drift further, carrying with us the thought of how narrow the balance of survival can be. From Earth's fragile success, our gaze can turn outward to another world nearby, a world that, for a long time, was thought to be our twin. Venus, bright and steady in the evening sky, a lantern against the dark, has long whispered promises of kinship. It is similar in size to Earth, similar in mass, and it orbits not far from us. For centuries, people imagined Venus as a second home, perhaps covered in lush jungles, perhaps rich with oceans of its own. Yet when the veils of cloud were finally pierced by observation, what was revealed was not a sister, but a warning. Venus is a furnace. Its air is so heavy, so laden with carbon dioxide, that the surface lies crushed beneath nearly 100 times the pressure of Earth's atmosphere. The heat that builds there is unrelenting, as if the entire planet were trapped beneath a thick, smothering blanket that never lifts. The greenhouse effect, which on Earth brings warmth enough for seas to remain liquid, on Venus has run to its extreme. Day or night, equator or pole, the temperature hovers around 900 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot enough to melt lead? Hot enough to erase the possibility of oceans, forests, or even the simplest life. And yet, perhaps once, it might not have been so. Perhaps Venus began more gently, with water resting on its surface, with clouds that shifted in rhythm to a younger sun. Some scientists imagine shallow seas, fragile and temporary, that might have graced Venus in its earliest chapters. If so, they did not last long. The growing sun poured more energy upon Venus than Earth received, and the heat tipped the balance. Oceans began to evaporate, drop by drop, breath by breath, and water vapor rose into the air. Water vapor is itself a greenhouse gas, and so the warming deepened and the cycle quickened until at last the seas were drawn into the sky. In time, radiation from the sun split those molecules apart, letting hydrogen escape into space, leaving Venus dry, stripped, and irreversibly changed. The surface became a desert of stone, scorched and reshaped by volcanoes, cloaked by clouds of sulfuric acid. Nothing moves there but the winds, thick and slow, dragging their burden of heat across the entire globe. When we look at Venus, we are looking at a failed path, a planet that might have been a home, but became a furnace instead. To imagine this is to ask quietly, what if Earth had taken this path? The margin between us and Venus is not so wide, only a little distance, only a little difference. What if our orbit had been closer, our seas shallower, our balance of gases more fragile? Perhaps the forests you know would never have grown. Perhaps the oceans you imagine as eternal would have boiled into sky and fled into space. Perhaps this very moment, this listening, this drifting of your thoughts would never have been possible. Venus reminds us that survival is not the rule. It is the exception. Failure is common, persistence is rare, and sometimes failure comes, not in a sudden blow, but in a slow spiral, a tightening loop of warming and evaporation, each step pushing the world further into the fire, until retreat is no longer possible. A runaway, gentle at first, then unstoppable. There is something sobering in that thought, but also something strangely tender. For Venus, though lost to us as a home, remains beautiful. Its clouds shine white against the darkness. Its presence in the sky still stirs wonder. Even in failure, a world can leave behind a kind of grace, a lesson wrapped in light. And for Earth, the comparison is humbling. Our planet carries oceans deep enough and cycles complex enough to hold back such a fate, at least for now. The thin line of balance is preserved, not by certainty, but by a precarious weaving of factors: distance, atmosphere, rotation, chemistry, all aligning long enough to let life breathe. When you next see Venus glimmering at twilight, you might think of it not as a distant star, but as a mirror held up to Earth, showing what might have been. It is a reminder that in the grand experiment of planets, not all trials succeed and not all beginnings endure. The furnace of Venus is one of many ways a world can fail. Soon we will look at another failure, drawn from the opposite side of the spectrum. Not a world undone by fire, but one silenced by ice. Where Venus burned too brightly, others froze too deeply. Both are signatures of the same truth. That balance is fragile, and worlds can falter in many ways. From fire, let us drift now into cold. If Venus stands as the furnace that burned too hot, Mars waits as the silence that cooled too quickly. At first glance, the red planet seems quiet, almost still, a sphere of dust and stone circling just beyond Earth. But when we look more closely, when we trace the valleys and channels etched across its surface, we find the ghost of something different. Mars once carried water. Rivers once carved paths across its plains. Perhaps shallow seas once rippled beneath its sky. And then, slowly, inevitably, the warmth slipped away. Mars is a world of absence. Its air is thin, so thin that standing on its surface would feel almost like standing in a vacuum. The sky there is a pale, dusty orange, the light weak, the winds sharp. Any water left on the surface boils or freezes away in an instant. What remains are scars, winding valleys, branching deltas, and lake beds long since emptied. These shapes are diaries written in stone, each line recording a chapter of a time when water still moved freely. To look at them is to read the memory of rivers that no longer flow. The reason is simple, though profound. Mars is smaller than Earth. Its core cooled more quickly. Its magnetic field faded, and its air began to drift into space. Without a thick blanket of atmosphere to hold heat, without protection against the sun's relentless winds, the planet could not keep its seas. Drop by drop, the water sank into the ground or escaped into the air, until silence replaced motion. What remains is a desert frozen in time. A world that once held promise, but slipped from its grasp. Some call Mars the failed promise of life, for it had so many beginnings that resemble Earth's own. Water on the surface, chemical ingredients in the soil, warmth enough for rivers to flow. If Earth is a story of endurance, Mars is a story interrupted. We do not know if life ever took hold there. Perhaps it flickered, briefly, in the warmth of ancient pools. Perhaps it never began at all. We cannot rule it out, nor can we prove it. The silence does not tell us, and yet, even in its failure, Mars is strangely captivating. Its deserts stretch out like a painting in muted red and gold. Its mountains rise taller than any on Earth. Its canyons cut deeper and longer than our own. There is a stark beauty in its barrenness, a kind of solemn reminder that even when the Ebiduri story halts, the stage remains. For you, drifting now, consider the symmetry. Venus burned, Mars froze. One world was undone by too much heat, another by too little. Earth, for now, rests between them, a narrow bridge of balance. To one side lies the furnace, to the other, the silence. Both are lessons written in stone and sky. If you feel yourself drifting away, the thought will remain here when you return. Extremes, whether of fire or of frost, erase chances alike. It is only in the fragile middle that a world can breathe long enough for life to endure. And so, from Mars's frozen silence, we can carry the question onward. If heat and cold alike are failures, what of the air itself? What happens when a planet breathes the wrong gases, when its skies become poison, even if its temperatures are kind? Soon, we will wander into that possibility, into the worlds where the air itself closes the door. Carrying the thought forward, we arrive now at the skies themselves, the fragile veils that wrap a world and decide whether it can breathe or whether it must fall silent. Atmospheres are thin, delicate films, yet they shape everything. They keep seas liquid, winds in motion, and warmth close enough to sustain. And when those veils thicken with poison or vanish into emptiness, the world beneath them changes forever. Consider Mercury, closest to the Sun. It is a planet almost naked, stripped of the blanket that might have softened its extremes. By day, its surface bakes in the unfiltered heat, rising higher than any desert on Earth could endure. By night, without any air to hold the warmth, the temperature plunges into unimaginable cold. Mercury lives between two extremes each cycle, its rocks expanding and contracting, its surface fractured by the strain. There is no buffer, no shelter. It is the lesson of absence. When the veil is torn away, a planet becomes raw, exposed, forever inhospitable. Then think of Titan, Saturn's largest moon, where the atmosphere is not absent, but alien. Here the veil is thick, but it is woven of methane and nitrogen, cloaked in orange haze. Its lakes are not of water, but of liquid hydrocarbons, shining dark and cold under a distant sun. To walk on Titan would not be to breathe, but to suffocate in gases unfit for lungs. And yet, in its own way, Titan suggests that habitability might not always mean like Earth. Perhaps there are worlds where life could emerge in chemistries we cannot yet imagine, drawing breath from substances that to us seem toxic. What appears as poison to one perspective might be nourishment to another. Still, for Earth, the lesson is sharp. Our air is breathable only because it is balanced. A mingling of oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and water vapor in just the right proportions. Shift those numbers too far in any direction, and the balance collapses. Too little oxygen, and the fire of life dims. Too much carbon dioxide, and the greenhouse deepens, as Venus showed us. Strip the air away entirely, as on Mars or Mercury, and oceans vanish to space. Add layers of toxins and survival withers. You, listening now, might picture the atmosphere as nothing more than blue sky, an endless vault above your head. But really it is a film no thicker, proportionally, than the skin of an apple. All the weather, all the breathing, all the clouds and storms that fill our sense of home are contained within that fragile sheath. Beyond it lies the vacuum. Beyond it lies silence. What if Earth's veil thinned? What if the magnetic shield that guards it from the solar wind faltered, and our air began to leak into space? What if the balance of gases shifted, whether by natural upheaval or by the slow hand of time, until oxygen faded or greenhouse gases thickened beyond repair? It might take millions of years, or it might come more suddenly. We cannot know. What we do know is that the veil is fragile, and fragility is always a reminder of impermanence. Yet there is beauty even in the poisoned skies of other worlds. Mercury's frequent voice. Silence is austere. A portrait of raw stone lit by the sun's fire. Titan's haze glows softly, turning sunlight into muted orange twilight. These places, though inhospitable, are still wondrous, still part of the grand spectrum of what worlds can be. They remind us that Earth is not inevitable. It is one expression of possibility, one version among many. If you are drifting now, that thought may settle deep. The air we breathe is not permanent. It is a gift written into the present moment, a balance that might not hold forever. Other worlds show us what happens when the veil is stripped away or reshaped into alien forms. Their skies are cautionary, but also expansive, teaching us how many different ways a planet can breathe, or fail to breathe at all. From here, we will step gently into another lesson, one written not in air, but in motion. For even when a world has the right atmosphere, even when it carries warmth and water, the violence of impacts and bombardments can reset everything, wiping the slate clean. Soon, we will drift into those cataclysms, the scars of collisions, the storms of stone and fire that remind us that survival can be undone in an instant. From the sky above, let us turn inward now, to the secret heart of worlds. For just as The veil of atmosphere guards the surface. There is a deeper guardian hidden within, the molten core. A planet's heart, churning and restless, generates a magnetic field, an invisible shield that pushes back the charged winds streaming from its star. Without this shield, a world is slowly unmade, its atmosphere stripped grain by grain, its surface left vulnerable to radiation. The story of habitability is not only about distance or air or water, but about the hidden fires beneath our feet. Earth carries such a fire. Deep below the crust, you know. Beneath the stone and the mantle, the core turns and moves, molten iron flowing in slow currents. That movement creates a dynamo, a vast engine that spins out invisible lines of force, curving outward, wrapping the planet in a magnetic cocoon. You cannot see it. You cannot feel it. And yet, without it, the air you breathe would be thinner, the seas smaller, the surface far less welcoming. The magnetic field holds back the solar wind, allowing the atmosphere to linger, allowing oceans to remain liquid, allowing life to continue its fragile experiment. Mars reminds us of what happens when the core cools. Once, it too likely carried a magnetic shield, though weaker than Earth's. But over time, its smaller size meant its inner fire burned out more quickly. Its dynamo slowed, and at last, it fell silent. With the shield gone, the solar wind pressed, harder. Molecules of air were lifted into space, carried off little by little, until the atmosphere thinned to its current fragile wisp. Mars did not lose its rivers in a single day. It lost them because its heart grew cold. The silence on its surface today is the silence of a planet whose core has failed. To think of this is to realize how much of habitability depends on what we cannot see. The surface of a world might seem steady, but its fate is written beneath, in fires and flows that never meet the open sky. Earth's dynamo has lasted billions of years and may last billions more. But it is not eternal. One day, far in the future, the churning may slow, the shield may falter, and when that happens, Earth too will feel the touch of winds from the sun, relentless and eroding. But for now, those hidden fires endure. The auroras at the poles, curtains of light that ripple green and violet against the night, are reminders of the shield at work. Charged particles caught and steered by invisible lines, painting the sky with color, making visible for a moment the presence of the unseen protector. To watch an aurora is to glimpse the whisper of the core, the quiet reassurance that the shield still holds. For you, drifting in thought now, imagine the planet as a living being. Its core is its heartbeat, slow but steady, invisible yet vital. When the heart beats strong, the surface flourishes. When it weakens, the body falters. And in the great library of worlds, many volumes end not because of surface calamities, but because the heartbeat within went silent. It is humbling to remember. Habitability depends on hidden fires. Earth's comfort rests not only in its oceans and air, but in the restless motions of molten iron far below. Without that unseen dynamo, the balance above would collapse. Perhaps then, life anywhere depends not only on stars and water and chemistry, but on whether a planet's inner heart can burn long enough, strong enough, to hold back the silence of space. From here, we can wander onward to another possibility, one written not in hidden fires, but in sudden violence. For sometimes it is not the slow cooling of a core, but the shattering blow of an impact that ends a world's story. Soon, We will step into those moments, into the scars of collisions that rewrite a planet's fate in a single instant. From the hidden fires at a planet's heart, let us drift now into silence once more. Not the silence of a single world, but the quiet of many. Scattered across the cosmos are places that never quite held on. Worlds that almost wrote their stories, only to leave them unfinished. They are the forgotten graveyards of possibility, reminders that beginnings are plentiful, but endurance is rare. Each failure leaves a trace, a thin, bright line in space, a mark etched into stone, an atmosphere lost to the wind. Venus, wrapped in its suffocating shroud. Mars, frozen beneath its pale sky. Mercury, bare and exposed, carrying its scars like wrinkles. Titan, strange and alien, with lakes of liquid hydrocarbons under a dim sun. Every one of them speaks softly of what might have been, if only the balance had held. Too hot, too cold, too weak, too late. The refrain echoes across the vault of worlds. Some worlds burn, some worlds freeze, some lose their hearts, their shields, their air. Some collapse under the weight of their own skies. Some never make it past their first breaths, and each time the silence spreads, another page left unfinished in the library of time. Perhaps the universe is filled with such cemeteries, places where possibility bloomed for a moment, then withered. Places where chemistry danced, then fell still. Places where oceans almost formed, or rivers almost ran, or air almost thickened enough to linger. Worlds that hover on the edge of a almost, then drift back into the stillness of never. If you are drifting now, you may feel that repetition settle in. Too hot, too cold, too weak, too late. It is the rhythm of failure, the quiet cadence of endings. But within that rhythm lies perspective. Earth is not the only world that could have been. It is one of many, and it is one that endures, at least for now. How close did Earth come to joining those graveyards? We cannot know for certain. Perhaps in its youth, the oceans almost boiled away, as they did on Venus. Perhaps the magnetic shield might have faltered, as it did on Mars. Perhaps asteroids and comets might have struck with greater violence, erasing the fragile beginnings of life before they took root. Each turn of chance, each hidden balance, brought Earth away from the silence and into survival. To look at the graveyards of other worlds is to see Earth more clearly, not as inevitable, but as improbable, not as guaranteed, but as fortunate. And that sense of fragility, of contingency, is what makes the present moment precious. For here you are, listening, breathing, alive within one of the rare successes. And still, the thought lingers. Earth, too, is not beyond failure. Its balance may shift, its shield may weaken, its story may one day join the silence. Nothing in the cosmos is immune to time. But, for now, the story continues. And the graveyards remain only as reminders. Silent fields of might-have-beens, stretching endlessly across the dark. From here, we can wander gently onward, away from the failures of worlds, toward the deeper question of what those failures mean. What do they tell us about the nature of survival? What do they whisper about the meaning of rarity, about the beauty of the fragile middle ground? Soon, we will step into that reflection, weaving philosophy with science as we hold Earth against the backdrop of so many silences. From the graveyards of other worlds, let us drift back now to our own. For Earth, too, once stood close to silence. Its survival was not born of calm or certainty, but of storms and fire, collisions and chaos. The Earth we know today, with its oceans and forests, its winds and clouds, is the result of countless narrow escapes. In its youth, it was anything but gentle. Imagine the skies, 4 billion years ago. They were thick with haze, veils of methane and carbon dioxide swirling in heavy layers. The air was not the soft blue we see today, but a shifting canopy of smoke and ash. Beneath it, the surface seethed. Oceans boiled, then cooled, then boiled again, as great impacts struck from the sky. Asteroids, some the size of mountains, rained down in endless succession, each one releasing firestorms, each one reshaping the surface. There were times when seas evaporated entirely, driven off into the sky by heat so intense, the surface became molten once more. There were times when the young Earth looked more like a glowing ember than a stable world, its crust breaking, reforming, breaking again. To live then, if life had begun, was to endure catastrophe after catastrophe. And yet, within that chaos, something fragile persisted. Deep in the oceans, in vents where mineral-rich water poured from the crust, chemical reactions stirred. Simple molecules met, joined, separated, joined again. Out of that endless trial and error, the first stirrings of life began. Perhaps it was only once, in one sheltered place, and perhaps it flickered and nearly vanished 1,000 times. But somehow, against the odds, it held on. This is Earth's story, not a tale of perfect design, but of survival through turmoil. The early bombardment that might have erased life instead may have delivered water and organic compounds, seeding the oceans with ingredients. The unstable skies that seemed hostile may have shielded the surface from radiation, creating safe havens below. Again and again, Earth walked the knife's edge, swaying between failure and persistence. When we look back, it is tempting to see inevitability, to imagine that oceans and forests were destined to appear, that humans listening now were always meant to be. But perhaps the truth is softer, humbler, that Earth could just as easily have joined the silence of Mars or the furnace of Venus, that its survival is not a guarantee, but a fragile outcome of chance and balance. You, drifting now, are part of that survivor's story. Every breath you take is linked to those first breaths in the ancient oceans, to the resilience of molecules that endured storms, heat, and impact. Each tree that sways in the wind, each bird that lifts into the sky, is a reminder of how much nearly did not happen. If you find yourself slipping away, the thought will be here when you return. Earth's youth was not gentle. It was violent, unstable, seemingly unwelcoming. And yet, from within that violence, life began. A survivor's story, not a perfect design. From here, we can drift deeper into Earth's narrow escapes. For the story does not end with early bombardments. Again and again, through ice ages and fire, through mass extinctions and fragile recoveries, Earth nearly joined the graveyards of silence. Soon, we will trace those moments, seeing how thin the line truly was, and how remarkable it is that the story continues still. Carrying that story forward, we move from the fire of Earth's youth into the deep cold that followed. For there were times, long after oceans had calmed and skies had cleared, when Earth nearly froze into silence. Entire continents were locked beneath miles of ice. Even the seas, vast and restless, stiffened into a hard white skin, stretching almost from pole to pole. The planet became a pale orb, gleaming like a frozen marble adrift in space. These were the great freezes, moments when life's fragile thread came close to snapping. Imagine looking down upon that world. From orbit, you would see little sign of warmth, little sign of blue. The ice sheet reflected sunlight back into the sky, making the planet colder still. A feedback loop of silence. The more the ice spread, the less heat was held. Winds screamed across the surface, but they carried no rain, no warmth, only dust and frost. To most eyes, it would seem like a failed world, another grave in the cosmic library, its story closed too soon. And yet, even in that silence, something lived. Not everywhere, not in abundance, but in cracks, in shadows, in vents beneath the ice. Deep in the oceans, where the crust released its hidden heat, small communities clung on. Around black smokers and mineral springs, bacteria and archaea fed on chemical energy, uncaring of the frozen world above. Perhaps pools of water lingered near the equator, or thin ribbons of sea broke through the ice when volcanoes released their warmth. These were the refuges, narrow, precarious, but enough. Life during those ages was not flourishing in sunlight, not painting oceans green with algae, not filling skies with oxygen. It was surviving, and only surviving. A scattered persistence, hidden from view. But persistence was all it needed. For tens of millions of years, the ice held, and for tens of millions of years, life endured, waiting for change. Eventually, the frozen spell broke. Volcanoes exhaled carbon dioxide faster than the ice could consume it. Slowly, invisibly at first, the greenhouse veil thickened. The air trapped more warmth, and the ice began to retreat. Oceans darkened again, absorbing sunlight, feeding the feedback in reverse. The marble softened back into a living blue sphere. What seemed a graveyard was only a pause, and the story moved forward once more. When we reflect on those long winters, it is easy to imagine how close the planet came to failure. A little more ice, a little less volcanic breath, and perhaps the surface would have stayed frozen forever. A world of silence, its oceans entombed, its story sealed. But that is not what happened. Instead, the fragile persistence of life outlasted the cold. You, listening now, are the heir of that persistence. Every leaf and feather, every movement of your own chest as air flows in and out, owes its possibility to the hidden communities that endured beneath the ice. If Earth had not thawed, if life had not waited, there would be no forests, no oceans full of fish, no quiet human voices wondering about failed worlds. So we learn again that survival is not inevitability. It is endurance. It is the refusal of small things to vanish, even when the world seems determined to erase them. Too hot, too cold, too dark, too long, and still, something found a way. Soon, we will look at another edge Earth walked, when survival meant not enduring cold, but fire. Extinctions came like sudden storms, sweeping away almost everything that lived. And still, somehow, the story did not end. From the long winters of ice, let us drift now into another kind of trial. One born not from the cold silence of space, but from the restless heart of Earth itself. For beneath the continents and oceans, the ground is never still. Plates shift and collide. Mountains rise and crumble. Oceans open and close. This motion is the quiet engine of habitability, recycling carbon, shaping climates, breathing stability into the atmosphere. Yet the same forces that make Earth livable also threaten to unmake it. There have been moments when that restless geology turned violent, when the planet's own breath nearly smothered the life upon it. Supervolcanoes, so vast they defy easy scale, have erupted, pouring not just ash, but entire epochs of change into the sky. Imagine a mountain splitting open, releasing sheets of lava across whole continents, and with it, gases that linger for tens of thousands of years. Not just a single eruption, but a fire that continues in pulses, in waves, for centuries. The Siberian traps, 250 million years ago, offer one such memory. For nearly 1 million years, molten rock spilled in waves across what is now northern Asia, releasing carbon dioxide and methane in quantities unimaginable. The air thickened, the seas warmed, oxygen thinned. More than 90% of marine species disappeared, as though the ocean itself had forgotten how to breathe. On land, forests withered, insects vanished, reptiles stumbled toward extinction. It was not a single blow, but a long, suffocating fever, driven by the fires from within. Other times, it was ash and dust that brought silence. The Yellowstone, supervolcano, though quiet now, has erupted with a force that blanketed half a continent in fallout. Ash darkened skies, rivers choked, climates shifted overnight. Even when eruptions did not erase life entirely, they forced it into new forms, pressing the story forward through edits written in fire. And beyond the eruptions themselves, the drifting of continents carried its own risks. As land masses collided, as mountains rose, as ocean currents rerouted, climates were rewritten. Deserts bloomed where seas had been. Ice crept closer where forests once stood. Habitability is not a steady state, but a delicate balance maintained only for a while. Every shift in stone, every plume of magma, every trembling of the crust is another reminder. Earth's story is not a calm diary, but a manuscript full of erasures and rewrites. Perhaps it is humbling to imagine that what makes our world rich with possibility is also what endangers it. Without plate tectonics, without the slow breathing of carbon between rock and air, Earth might have become a frozen marble long ago, lifeless as the moon. Yet with tectonics comes risk, eruptions, extinctions, and the sudden redirection of life's path, a gift and a danger, inseparable. You drifting now are here because life found a way to adapt to these fires. Each extinction, each upheaval, was not the end, but a narrowing, a forced passage through which only some forms survived. Without the reshaping of continents, there would be no great migrations. Without the breath of volcanoes, no renewal of soils. And yet, too much of either, and the line would have broken. So we remember, habitability is fragile. The earth beneath us is not a solid stage, but a restless participant in the story. Sometimes generous, sometimes cruel, always unpredictable. Every forest, every ocean, every quiet breath depends upon forces we rarely see. Molten rivers miles below, plates grinding slowly in the dark, pressure building in chambers that may one day change the world again. If you are drifting now, the thought will wait here for you, that the ground itself is not passive, but alive with risk and gift alike. Earth's survival is not just about its distance from the sun, but about the hidden fire within, always shaping, always threatening, always creating anew. And from this restless ground, we turn next to other brushes with silence. Not just the fire and shifting stone, but the visitors from beyond, whose impacts have carved scars across the earth, rewriting its story in sudden, violent strokes. Carrying that thought onward from the restless fires below, let us lift our gaze to the delicate expanse above, the sky itself, Earth's fragile veil. For all its vast appearance, stretching endlessly in every direction, the atmosphere is astonishingly thin, a film of gases hugging the planet with less substance than the paint upon a globe. And yet, this veil is everything. Without it, the ground would be scorched by unfiltered radiation, oceans would hiss into space, and every breath would be impossible. It is at once shield, stage, and storyteller, holding within it the record of countless transformations. But the sky's story has never been a simple gift. It is a tale of revolutions, of near catastrophes, of life creating its own dangers before learning how to live with them. Long ago, when the planet was still young, Earth's air was thick with methane and carbon dioxide, an atmosphere heavy and unbreathable by the standards of today. Into that alien world, tiny organisms began their quiet work. They split water, they drank in sunlight, they released oxygen as a byproduct. What seems so ordinary now was, then, a radical invention. Photosynthesis, the turning of light into living energy. At first, the oxygen they made drifted unnoticed. It reacted with iron in the seas, staining ocean beds with rust-red deposits that can still be read in ancient rocks. But eventually, the iron was saturated, and oxygen began to accumulate in the sky itself. What followed was not a gentle adjustment, but a planetary crisis. For much of the life that had thrived in methane-rich conditions, oxygen was a poison. What one lineage produced as waste, another lineage experienced as death. This moment, known to scientists as the Great Oxidation Event, is sometimes called Earth's first mass extinction. Whole microbial communities vanished, their chemistry unable to survive in the new air. Yet at the same time, oxygen opened doors that had never existed before. With it came ozone, a protective layer that softened the sun's harsh ultraviolet rays. With it came the possibility of larger, more energy-hungry organisms, capable of building tissues, moving, sensing, evolving toward complexity. The sky became both executioner and guardian, a paradoxical veil, bringing loss and possibility. In equal measure, perhaps it is humbling to think that life nearly poisoned itself to death. Perhaps it is stranger still to realize that the very air you breathe now is the residue of that ancient catastrophe. Every inhale carries not only oxygen, but memory of oceans turning red, of microbes struggling, of a world remade by its smallest inhabitants. The atmosphere is not just a protective blanket, but a living record of choices made by organisms long vanished. Even after oxygen became established, the balance was never secure. Too much, and fire races uncontrollably across landscapes. Too little, and complex life cannot endure. Volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and shifts in the carbon cycle have all tugged at that balance. More than once, the veil has thinned, allowing the sun's radiation to strike more deeply. More than once, gases have spiked or vanished, tilting climates into near disaster. You, drifting now, live in a moment where the sky is transparent enough to let light in, yet protective enough to keep harm out. It is a rare equilibrium, held steady only for a while. One can imagine other Earths, other times, when the veil thickened too far, when methane cloaked the sky in haze, when sulfur dimmed the light, when oxygen fell and left animals gasping. Each variation a reminder that stability is temporary, that habitability depends on a balance thinner than paper, more delicate than glass. The atmosphere is a paradox. It is at once invisible, taken for granted, and utterly vital. It shields us from meteors, burning them into trails of light. It filters the sun, softening its fierceness into the glow of a morning sky. It carries the whispers of weather, the cycle of rains, the migration of winds. Yet it is also the stage of vulnerability, the layer that can be undone by a shift too sudden or a burden too heavy. If you are drifting, know this thought will remain. The air around you is not fixed, not eternal, but the ongoing work of countless generations of life itself, shaping and reshaping the veil. And as we reflect on this fragile sky, it leads us gently toward another truth, that survival has always been about negotiation, not just with fire and stone, not just with ice and ocean, but with the very air itself. Soon, we will look at how even with such a veil in place, Earth's path remained precarious, tested by blows from beyond, sudden visitors whose arrival could shift the story in an instant. From the fragile veil of sky, let us drift now into the quiet awareness of how near the margins Earth has always lived. For when we trace back through its history, we find not a steady, certain path, but a series of narrow escapes, a story of edges, of near misses, of brushes with silence. So close, so fragile, so easily undone. There were the great freezes, when ice spread nearly from pole to pole, reflecting sunlight back into space, threatening to lock the planet in a permanent stillness. There were the fires from within, when the Earth's crust split and belched heat and gases, smothering seas, darkening skies, thinning the air to the brink of collapse. There were the subtle shifts of atmosphere, when life itself tipped the balance and poisoned its own stage, nearly suffocating the very possibility of complexity. At each turn, the line could have broken. At each turn, the Earth could have joined the many other worlds that failed. Perhaps it was chance. Perhaps it was the slow resilience of chemistry, finding a new equilibrium in the face of catastrophe. Or perhaps it was both, accident and persistence, woven together in the threads of survival. What is certain is that nothing about this survival was guaranteed. You, listening now, carry within you the long inheritance of those narrow escapes. Every breath, every heartbeat, every thought drifts upon the fragile foundation of countless, avoided endings. It might be humbling, even unsettling, to realize how easily Earth might have been another Mars, another Venus, another silent graveyard turning through space. And yet, here it is, still green, still blue, still holding oceans, still carrying forests, still allowing you to breathe. Philosophers sometimes speak of contingency, of the way the smallest change at the right moment can ripple outward to shape an entire future. A volcanic eruption a little stronger, an asteroid a little larger, an ice age a little longer. And the long chain leading to this very moment might have been severed. The difference between life and silence, between continuation and erasure, might be measured in margins too small for the mind to grasp. So close, so fragile, so easily undone. And yet, from those near misses came quiet chances. Life retreated to the vents of the deep ocean, to hidden pools, to cracks in ice. And from those refuges, it began again. After the fires, after the ash, after the floods, new ecologies arose, different and unexpected. After extinction, new species emerged, filling niches that had never existed before, out of fragility, possibility, out of risk, renewal. The Earth's near failures became, in some strange way, part of the fuel for its continued story. It might be tempting to see design in this, to imagine inevitability, that Earth was meant to survive, meant to harbor life, meant to arrive here. But perhaps it is gentler and more honest to admit the uncertainty. Perhaps survival was never written in stone. Perhaps it was simply the persistence of matter and energy, adapting at every turn, never perfect, never secure, always provisional. And if that is so, then what does it mean for the others? The failed worlds we have seen, the graveyards we have imagined? Perhaps they too came close, so very close. Perhaps on some Mars-like world in another star system, water nearly lingered just long enough for complexity to form. Perhaps on some Venus-like twin, the greenhouse nearly remained stable before tipping too far. Survival may be an accident, but it is not a lonely one. The universe may be littered with almosts, with might-have-beens, with stories that began but never reached their middle, let alone their end. For Earth, the difference was a balance held just a little longer, a chemistry adapted just a little faster, a refuge that remained open just long enough. For us, it feels like destiny, but from a wider view, it is one narrow path among countless others that faltered. If you are drifting, let the thought rest here, that your world is not inevitable, not perfect, not secure, but lucky. A survivor's story written in fragile ink, held together by chance and by persistence alike. And as we close this reflection, the question quietly turns outward. If Earth survived so many near misses, then how many others did not? How many worlds once held the same fragile potential, only to slip, to falter, to freeze, to burn? And what might those failures teach us about the rarity or the abundance of life itself? From the reflection on Earth's fragile survival, let us drift further outward, into the quiet expanse where other worlds turn in silence. They cannot speak in voices we would recognize, yet they leave marks, signs, faint impressions, and so, in their own way, they can be read. Scientists, dreamers, and listeners of the sky have learned to treat these barren planets as books in a vast and unfinished library. Each crater, each thin trace of atmosphere, each lifeless desert is a kind of page. Not all the words remain, but enough ink lingers to suggest the story that once was. Spectroscopy becomes the tool for this listening, the art of light itself carrying secrets. When starlight passes through the veil of a distant planet, certain wavelengths are absorbed, leaving behind a pattern of lines, a code that can be interpreted. These lines are fingerprints of molecules: oxygen, methane, carbon dioxide, water vapor. From them, a whole atmosphere can be imagined. And from that atmosphere, the potential fates of a world can be glimpsed. Perhaps the air is heavy with carbon dioxide, a sign of greenhouse heat building beyond control. Perhaps methane lingers without oxygen, suggesting a chemistry stalled before complexity could bloom. Or perhaps the spectrum is flat, silent, with no trace of gases at all. A bare, stripped sphere circling its star, its history erased. To look at such patterns is to read memoirs written not in sentences, but in colors of light stretched across the universe. Craters tell another story, carved into the faces of moons and planets like scars that never healed. On Earth, weather and water blur such marks over time. But on the Moon, on Mercury, on countless smaller bodies, each impact remains visible for billions of years. They remind us that the cosmos has always been a storm of collisions, a place where survival is measured not only by distance from the sun, but by the fortune of avoiding a rock too large, an impact too final. Each crater is a punctuation mark in a planetary diary, a note that something once arrived with violent certainty. Deserts and dry valleys reveal more subtle failures. On Mars, riverbeds curve across empty plains, their channels leading nowhere. They are not filled with water now, but they whisper of flow long ago, of a time when rain fell and seas gathered. To stand within those canyons, even in imagination, is to feel the ache of a story cut short. A planet that held the promise of blue only to lose it to cold and thin air. In their silence, these valleys tell us that beginnings are not enough. To start is one thing. To endure is another. Each failure becomes a kind of lesson, though not in the human sense of punishment or design. Rather, they are experiments, trials, in the vast laboratory of the cosmos. Some end in boiling skies, some in frozen silence, some in air too toxic or too thin. Each one is a reminder that habitability is not the default, but the exception, and in their variety, they expand our sense of what is possible, of what might be waiting beyond. You, drifting now, might imagine these worlds as graves, but not graves of despair. More like quiet cemeteries in which each stone carries an inscription, even if half erased. Too hot, too cold, too weak, too late. Each epitaph adds context to Earth's improbable survival, each one shaping our sense of just how narrow the path can be. It may be that Earth's story could not be fully appreciated without these companions in failure. To see the dead valleys of Mars is to better understand the living rivers of Earth. To measure the thick, suffocating air of Venus is to better value the breathable thinness of our own. To look upon barren moons is to feel gratitude for the forests, oceans, and winds that still stir here. The failures are not only ends, they are mirrors. And so, the cosmic graveyard becomes a classroom of sorts, teaching us not through voices, but through silence. Teaching us that life is a rare persistence, that survival is fragile, that the universe is patient in its trial and error. If you are drifting, let the thought rest softly here, that every quiet planet beyond is not just an empty place, but a reminder, a record, a lesson written in stone and air. Soon, we will turn to one of the most haunting questions such lessons raise, whether Earth's survival is meaningful or merely chance, and what that might mean for the countless other worlds still waiting in the dark. Carrying that thought further, we can let numbers become a kind of hush, a soft pressure felt, rather than heard, the weight of probability settling over the story of worlds. There are, by any gentle estimate, billions of stars in our galaxy, and beyond it, galaxies upon galaxies, each a lantern crowded with possibilities. Around many of those stars, planets turn quietly, unseen. Some are large and stormy, some small and barren, some wrapped in gas, some cloaked in ice. The mind wants to leap to comfort. With so many dice rolling, surely success must be common. But probability has its own gravity. It does not comfort. It simply counts. Imagine a long corridor lined with sieves, each one finer than the last. cloud of worlds drifts in at one end. The first sieve removes those too close to their stars, their rocks glazed into oceans of fire. The second removes those too far, their seas locked inside stone. Another sieve asks for water at the surface, not just buried as ice or vapor. Another asks for a sky that lingers, thin enough to breathe, thick enough to protect. Another asks for a magnetic shield, spun by a molten heart. Another asks for calm periods between storms, for impacts that do not shatter the table set for life. Another asks for chemistry that can learn to copy itself, and yet another asks for the patience of billions of years. With each sieve, the cloud thins. With each sieve, the silence grows. So close, so fragile, so easily undone. Probability is not a verdict, but a pattern. If a great many conditions must align, and if each condition fails more often than it holds, then the product of those chances becomes small. Not impossible, but rare, like a bright thread woven through a dark cloth. We cannot know the exact numbers, and perhaps exactness is not the point. The point is the cascade. Many gates, few passers. The point is the hourglass. Wide at the top with beginnings, narrow at the waist, where endurance must be proven. Consider time itself as one more sieve. A world might find balance for 1,000,000 years or 10 million, and yet that span may not be enough. Complex life, as we understand it, seems to require long intervals of relative stability, punctuated by edits rather than erasures. Stars age. Their brightness changes. Orbits wobble. Axes tilt. Volcanic breaths thicken or thin the sky. Windows open, then close. A planet may fit every other condition, but simply run out of time. In the mathematics of rarity, duration weighs heavily. A brief candle is not the same as a long day. And then there is the matter of habitability, not as a single number, but as a moving target. The region around a star where liquid water can exist migrates as the star evolves. The protective field within a planet strengthens and weakens with the churn of its core. Continents wander, colliding and parting, rerouting currents that carry. Heat like veins carry blood. To remain livable, a world must not only arrive in balance, it must keep rebalancing. A dancer adjusting each step while the floor itself shifts beneath. You, drifting now, might picture probability as a tide. It does not rush. It simply and steadily pulls most possibilities back into the sea. The shore remains, but narrow. Earth stands upon it not because shores are common, but because they exist at all. Thin margins where conditions hold just long enough, just gently enough, for oceans to breathe and forests to sway. This is not a reason for despair. It is an invitation to humility. If most planets fail, then Earth's thriving is not normal. It is rare. If most stories end early, then our long chapters are precious precisely because they could have been so short. The mathematics do not diminish wonder. They deepen it. They turn every leaf into an astonishment, every raindrop into an improbability, every quiet night into a gift being briefly unwrapped by consciousness. Perhaps, too, the weight of probability offers a caution against easy conclusions. A single success in a universe of chances tells us that survival is possible, not that it is common. A handful of hints from distant spectra suggest diversity, not destiny. We may one day find a second living world and feel the numbers tilt toward comfort. Or we may listen for centuries and hear only the wind across stone. we cannot know yet. What we can do is hold two truths at once: that the cosmos is abundant in worlds, and that the path those worlds must walk to sustain life is narrow and uneven. Think of survivorship. How our vision is shaped by the fact that we are here to look. From within a thriving biosphere, it is easy to mistake our good fortune for a rule. But probability whispers a gentler story. Observers will always arise, in the rare places where observation is possible. The common experience of a living planet may be common only among the uncommon. In a library filled with unfinished books, readers will be found only in the few books that continued long enough to give them pages. So close, so fragile, so easily undone. And still, the numbers leave room for hope. Rarity is not the same as absence. Even if only 1 in 1,000 worlds endures, even if 1 in 1,000,000 carries oceans for eons, the sheer scale of stars means there may be many havens scattered like dim embers through the dark. We might never reach them. We might never trade stories across the light years, but their possibility changes the shape of our solitude, expanding it from isolation into kinship at a distance. A kinship we cannot confirm, perhaps, but can imagine. Without haste. If you are drifting, let that thought rest. Probability narrows the path, but it does not close it. It reminds us that Earth's survival is not ordinary, and therefore it is worthy of care. It invites us to read the sky with patient eyes, to count without cynicism, to imagine without insisting. Soon, we'll look at another layer of this weighing. Not only how often failure comes, but what kinds of traces those failures leave behind, and how those traces might guide our search for histories like and unlike our own. For in the arithmetic of worlds, the quiet signatures of endings may be the clearest teachers of how beginnings can be kept. Carrying that thread onward, we might let our gaze drift from Earth and rest gently on its neighbors, for nearby worlds carry echoes of what might have been. Each one, in its silence or strangeness, holds up a kind of mirror, showing not what we are but what we could so easily have become. They are not identical twins, but cousins, close enough that comparison sharpens our sense of how narrow the margin of habitability truly is. Venus comes first, glowing like a lantern in the twilight sky, so bright that ancient eyes mistook her for a goddess. Yet beneath that brilliance lies a story of collapse. Venus and Earth are nearly the same size, born of the same cloud, orbiting the same star. For a time, their fates may have been close, but one tipped toward ruin. Its greenhouse effect thickened into a suffocating shroud. What might once have been oceans turned to vapor, then to loss. Today, Venus is wrapped in clouds of acid, its surface hot enough to melt lead, its air heavy with carbon dioxide. To peer at it is to see a warning, a world so close in form, so different in outcome. A reminder that habitability is not a birthright, but a balance, and that balance can slip. Then our attention drifts outward, to Mars, the red world, etched with scars that look like riverbeds. Its deserts are silent, yet those dry valleys whisper of water that once flowed. Mars cooled too quickly, its heart faltering, its shield against the solar wind dissolving. With atmosphere lost, the seas could not linger. What remains is a portrait of absence, a promise almost fulfilled, withdrawn before it could ripen. When we look at Mars, we see not only dust, but memory, a memory of streams that might have glimmered beneath sunlight, of shorelines where waves might once have lapped. And in that memory lies a sobering reflection. Life is not guaranteed, even when beginnings are kind. Further still, Titan waits, a moon cloaked in haze. Its atmosphere is thick, even thicker than Earth's, but filled with methane instead of oxygen. Rivers and lakes exist there, not of water, but of liquid hydrocarbons, flowing and pooling under a dim orange sky. It is both alien and familiar, a world with weather, with cycles, with motion that echoes our own, yet carried out in different chemistry. Some wonder if Titan might host exotic life, or if it is a rehearsal, a reminder that the recipe for habitability has many possible ingredients, not all of them our own. To imagine Titan is to feel the breadth of possibility, and to acknowledge how tuned Earth's particular mix is, like a song played in a rare key. And then Europa, moon of Jupiter, its surface an icy shell crossed with cracks like veins in glass. Beneath that ice, evidence suggests, lies a global ocean, warmed by tides that knead its interior. We cannot see the water directly, but all signs point toward its presence. A hidden sea, vast and dark. If ever there was a place beyond Earth where life might dwell, Europa is often named. But even there, the uncertainty reigns. Does the ocean connect with the surface? Can energy seep through enough to sustain chemistry that learns to grow? Or is it a silent ocean, lifeless despite its abundance? Europa teaches patience, reminding us that habitability may be buried, hidden behind barriers, waiting unseen. So close, so fragile, so easily undone. Each of these worlds, in their own way, carries a reflection of Earth's fragility. Venus warns of heat that runs away. Mars laments warmth lost too soon. Titan tempts us with chemistry that is almost familiar, almost ready. Europa whispers of hidden depths, of oceans that may or may not stir. They are not failures in any cruel sense, simply variations, paths taken, endings written in different ink, but together they sketch the thinness of the line Earth has walked. You, drifting now, might feel the quiet repetition. Earth is not inevitable. Earth is not the rule. Earth is one story among many possible drafts. And those other drafts, bright Venus, dry Mars, hazed Titan, icy Europa, serve as footnotes to our own survival, notes written in planetary margins. Perhaps, if life exists elsewhere, it will arise in such marginal places, in warmth beneath ice, in cycles written in unfamiliar gases in conditions we might not yet recognize. Or perhaps Earth remains an exception, a fragile island in a sea of almosts. The truth, still waiting, asks for patience. For now, all we can do is listen. And so, in comparing these echoes, we learn humility. Each world teaches something different, that beginnings do not guarantee continuations, that chemistry must find balance, that protection can falter, that oceans can hide in silence. Earth's stability is not a given, but a grace. To hold that thought is to look at every forest, every tide, every breath, with new reverence. Soon, we will let our attention widen further still, to the way even failed worlds leave behind. Signals, signatures we can learn to read, lessons we can gather from silence as much as from song. For in the cosmic graveyard, echoes are not endings, but guides. From these parallels and echoes, the mind drifts outward still further, past the familiar neighbors of Earth, into the wider unknown, where certainty grows thin and imagination must take its place. What lies there is not a ledger we can tally, but a universe of maybes. an endless expanse where each star might host its own experiments, most of them perhaps unfinished, most of them perhaps undone. To consider it is to lean gently against the edge of possibility, not to count, but to wonder. Maybe there was a planet circling a distant sun, its seas glittering under an alien sky, where chemistry began to stir, but never crossed the threshold into what we would call life. Maybe its oceans evaporated before complexity had time to find a foothold. Maybe it cooled too quickly, and all that remained was a frozen crust holding silence. Maybe there was. Maybe there wasn't. Maybe there was a world so much like Earth that, if seen from afar, we would not know the difference. A blue and white marble with swirling clouds, a touch of green, yet maybe its story ended in an asteroid strike too early, or a solar flare that stripped its air, or a series of accidents we can scarcely imagine. Maybe life began there, only to be extinguished before it had a chance to learn endurance. Maybe there was. Maybe there wasn't. Maybe there are countless planets where atmospheres thicken with gases toxic to what we would know, but perfect for forms of life we cannot yet conceive. Maybe they thrive, unseen and unimagined. Their stories carried in patterns we would not recognize as life at all. Or maybe the silence stretches everywhere, unbroken, but for rare sparks, like our own. Maybe there is. Maybe there isn't. The graveyard of failed worlds is vast beyond counting. Each star may host its children of dust and fire, each system unfolding with its own fragile experiments. If only a fraction of those begin with oceans, and only a fraction of those hold them long enough for life to rise, and only a fraction of those endure the upheavals of geology and sky, then survival may be rarer than we dare to admit. Perhaps the silence we hear when we look outward is not a paradox, but a natural outcome. Perhaps the universe is filled with ruins, not lifeless forever, but lifeless now. And yet, there is wonder in the thought, even if it is tinged with melancholy. For every maybe is a spark of imagination, a doorway to possibility. You, drifting, now can hold these maybes lightly, letting them gather like stars in a quiet night sky. Each one glimmers, even if distant, even if unreachable. To think of life as a flame helps. A flame can catch, but only in the right conditions. Too damp, and it never starts. Too dry, and it burns out quickly. The universe may be filled with unlit kindling, with sparks that flared but never held, with fires that caught for a while before wind or storm swept them away. Earth's fire still burns, fragile yet steady. Its glow small against the vastness, but bright enough for us to see by. Maybe we are not alone. Maybe we are. Maybe the cosmos hums with voices too faint for us to hear. Maybe it waits in silence, a silence that is not empty, but patient. Maybe there are ruins in the dark, and maybe there are gardens we have yet to glimpse. The truth hides among the maybes, and for now, all we can do is listen with wonder. So close, so fragile, so easily undone. The refrain lingers, a reminder not of despair, but of humility. For Earth's survival is not the only story, but one among billions of drafts the universe has written. Most, perhaps, never finished. Most, perhaps, never even begun. But to stand among the maybes is to feel the weight of rarity, and to sense the preciousness of the life that has endured here. And so, the thought rests, quiet but alive. Perhaps Earth's flame is unusual, but not unique. Perhaps somewhere in the sea of stars, another fire flickers. Perhaps we are already sharing this night with other lights, though we cannot yet see them. And even if not, the maybes themselves are enough to guide us onward, to remind us of how delicate survival is and how vast the canvas upon which it is painted. Soon, we will let our attention turn from the uncertainties of maybe to the question of meaning, what it might signify that Earth endures when so many others have fallen into silence, and what stories we choose to tell about that endurance. From the vast field of maybes, where countless possibilities flicker and fade, a quieter thought emerges, waiting like a whisper at the edge of perception. Fragility itself is not just a condition to be endured, but a source of meaning. It is the very delicateness of Earth's survival, the constant nearness of failure, that makes the story of this planet more than just a statistic in a cosmic ledger. Without risk, survival would have no weight. Without chance, endurance would carry no wonder. Consider a glass vessel balanced on a narrow ledge. Its beauty is not only in its form, but in the awareness that one slip would shatter it. Earth, too, has always lived on that ledge. Bombardments from the sky, deep freezes that locked it in ice, eruptions that painted the air with fire, oceans that might have boiled or vanished. At each turn, the story might have ended. That it did not is what gives the story power. The precariousness is what gives it value. If survival were guaranteed, if every world blossomed into a garden, then the presence of life would be ordinary. It would be no different than stones forming in a riverbed, no more astonishing than sand accumulating on a shore. But because it is rare, because it is fragile, it matters. A single flame in a field of ash carries more meaning than an endless blaze with no threat of darkness. Perhaps this is why, when we gaze at the stars, we feel not only curiosity, but awe. The vastness tells us how unlikely it is that we are here at all. You, drifting now, might feel that fragility as a kind of weight, but it can also be felt as a gift. To know that life could have failed, and almost did, is to know that each moment it continues is precious. Every breath of air depends on a balance that might not have been. Every drop of water is part of a chain of chance stretching back to the first oceans. Every step on solid ground rests on a history that could so easily have broken apart. To recognize this is not to fear it, but to honor it. There is a paradox. Here, gentle but profound. Fragility does not lessen the worth of existence, it deepens it. A mountain carved over eons may feel eternal, but it is the fragile bloom on its slope, lasting only a season, that catches the heart. The mountain is strong, but the flower is meaningful. So too, with Earth. Its strength lies not in perfection, but in persistence through vulnerability. Its meaning lies in the fact that it almost wasn't, that it walked the same edge that so many worlds slipped from, and somehow it held. Maybe this is what survival means in the largest sense. Not triumph, not inevitability, but endurance against all odds. A fragile persistence that carries weight precisely because it could have ended at any moment. Without fragility, there would be no story. Without risk, there would be no wonder. Without the possibility of silence, there would be no music in the sound of life. And if this is true for Earth, perhaps it is true for us as well. Human lives, like planetary lives, are fragile. They balance on edges, swayed by forces seen and unseen, vulnerable to change. Yet it is this very fragility that gives each life meaning. To love in a fragile world is to treasure what might be lost. To live in a fragile body is to know the weight of each moment. To exist at all, on a fragile planet, in a fragile cosmos, is to be part of something rare and wondrous. So close, so fragile, so easily undone. The words repeat, but this time they carry not only caution, but reverence. For fragility is not merely danger. It is also the reason survival matters. It is the reason beauty touches us, the reason wonder stirs us, the reason meaning arises at all. Without fragility, we might not notice. Without fragility, we might not care. As the thought settles, it leaves a gentle question behind. If fragility gives value, then what responsibility does survival carry? If Earth endures where others failed, what does that ask of us, who are part of its story now? Soon, we will turn to that question. From the meaning of survival in the cosmic graveyard to the meaning of survival here and now, within the thin, bright line of Earth's fragile flame, from the reflection on Earth's narrow survival, a softer echo rises, closer now, almost within reach. The fragility of the planet is not only a cosmic fact, but also a mirror, one that reflects back upon us. For our lives are not separate from that story. They are smaller versions of it, intimate echoes of the same precarious balance. As Earth teetered through fire and ice, so too do we move through our days. Each moment a continuation that might so easily have been cut short. Think of your breath now, slow and steady, carried by the air around you. That air is the result of countless trials, oceans shifting, organisms rising and falling, atmospheres nearly collapsing, and yet, here it is, filling your lungs, sustaining you. Each inhale is part of a chain unbroken across billions of years. It is not only biology, it is history made invisible flowing through you. To breathe is to partake in the survival of the planet itself. In that way, human life is not apart from Earth's fragility, but entwined with it. Your body carries water that once cycled through ancient seas. Your bones hold minerals carved from mountains born in fire. Your heartbeat depends on oxygen first created by tiny organisms long forgotten. You are not standing on the story of Earth. You are inside it, made of it, a continuation of it. And like the planet itself, you exist at the edge of possibility, delicate yet enduring. There is a tenderness in recognizing this. Mountains may seem immovable, oceans eternal, but they shift, they vanish, they begin again. And so it is with us. A single life, like a single world, is always more fragile than it appears. A sudden turn, a breath missed, a chance encounter, and everything changes. We balance, just as Earth has always balanced, between silence and song, between ending and continuation. And yet, here you are. Perhaps that is the deepest connection. The fact that survival does not erase fragility, it carries it forward. Earth survived the bombardments, the freezes, the floods, not by escaping fragility, but by enduring within it. So too do we live. To be human is to be vulnerable, to be unfinished, to be subject to forces we cannot always predict. But within that vulnerability lies meaning. Without it, our moments would be weightless. Without it, our love would not feel urgent. Without it, our lives would not feel precious. You, listening now, may feel your own fragility as a kind of shadow. The knowledge that time is short, that change is constant, that nothing holds forever. But fragility is not an enemy. It is the very thing that shapes our sense of value. A crystal shatters easily, yet that delicacy is what makes it beautiful. A flower wilts quickly, yet its brief bloom is what draws us close. In the same way, the brevity and delicacy of human life are what allow it to hold meaning. Earth, surviving against odds, reminds us that fragility does not mean weakness. It means significance. For something easily lost is something worth holding carefully. Something fleeting is something worth noticing. Something rare is something worth treasuring. Each life, like each world, is a fragile thread woven into a vast tapestry. Each can break, yet together they create a pattern that endures beyond any one strand. And yet, here you are, breathing, listening, alive within a universe where most worlds never reached this far. Your presence is not ordinary. It is an outcome, balanced on countless narrow ledges, both planetary and personal. To recognize that is not to fall into fear, but to awaken to wonder. You are fragile, yes, but that fragility makes every moment of your being all the more astonishing. As we carry this thought forward, the mirror between Earth's survival and our own begins to show us something deeper. Just as the planet's fragility has not prevented it from lasting billions of years, so too might our fragility not diminish us, but define us. To be fragile is to be alive. To be fragile is to be able to change. To be fragile is to be able to love. The mirror does not diminish us. It reflects our place in the same long, improbable story of survival. And as the story turns onward, we will ask, if both Earth and we are fragile, what responsibilities follow from that? What does it mean to carry forward a survival so delicately won? What does it mean to live well, knowing how easily it might all have been undone? Those questions wait, like quiet ripples on still water, as we drift deeper into the reflections ahead. Carrying the mirror of fragility forward, the thought begins to widen again, stretching beyond the present moment into the uncertain horizon. If Earth has survived so many narrow passages in the past, what of the future? Could this planet, resilient yet vulnerable, one day slip into the same silence that holds Venus, Mars, and the many failed worlds beyond? The page of tomorrow is not yet written, but we can imagine its outlines soft and unfinished, like ink waiting to dry. Already, the balance is delicate. The climate shifts in ways both natural and hastened by human hands. Temperatures rise, seas creep upward, storms gather strength. These are not entirely new threats. Earth has seen heat and flood before, has known glaciers pressing over continents and deserts spreading like seas. Yet the pace feels different now, accelerated, as though time itself has begun to lean. Whether through our actions or through the slow pull of cosmic cycles, the atmosphere that shelters us is never guaranteed. Even without our influence, the Earth is not fixed in place. Its continents drift like rafts, colliding and breaking apart, rewriting coastlines, raising mountains only to grind them down. Volcanoes stir deep beneath the crust, carrying both destruction and renewal. Over spans too long for us to feel, the very orbit shifts. The tilt of the axis wavers. The rhythm of seasons alters. Change is not an exception. It is the rule. To imagine Earth as a permanent sanctuary is to forget that it has always been restless, always rewriting itself. And beyond the planet itself, the star we orbit holds its own clock. The sun, now steady and golden, will not burn this way forever. Slowly, imperceptibly, its fuel diminishes. In hundreds of millions of years, it will shine hotter, bright enough to dry the oceans, bright enough to make Earth unlivable. In billions, it will expand into a red giant, swallowing or scorching the inner worlds. Long before that, the balance that allows life will be undone. Earth's story, however enduring it seems to us, is finite. This is not a cause for fear. It is a truth as natural as sunrise and sunset. All worlds eventually change. No flame burns without end. Planets are not eternal havens, but chapters within the larger book of the universe. To know this is not to despair, but to place value on the time that is given. If Earth is an open page, it is one that will one day close. That awareness gives weight to the words written now, to the lives unfolding within the margins of this chapter. Perhaps that is what makes the present so vivid, the recognition that impermanence shadows every possibility. The oceans we walk beside, the skies we breathe under, the forests and rivers we hold dear. None are guaranteed beyond the turning of ages. Their beauty is deepened by their transience. Just as a flower's bloom means more because it fades, so does a planet's. Habitability mean more because it cannot last forever. Fragility, once again, gives meaning. And so, the question is not whether Earth will someday join the graveyard of failed worlds. It will. The question is how long the story continues, and how we, as part of it, choose to live within that knowledge. A planet may endure for billions of years, but within that span, entire civilizations rise and fall. Entire species come and go. The page remains open for now. What is written upon it is not dictated by inevitability alone, but also by the choices we make, the balance we tend, the care we give. You, drifting now, are part of that page. Each breath you take, each step across the ground, each glance at the stars is part of Earth's unfolding story. The future stretches forward like a path half-lit, with turns unseen. It will carry challenges, shifts, endings, but it will also carry continuations, new forms of life, new patterns of meaning. To live within impermanence is not to be diminished by it. It is to be shaped by it, to recognize that what is fragile can still endure long enough to matter. Perhaps one day, far beyond our measure of time, Earth's name will be added to the silent ledger of failed worlds. But until then, its flame still burns, improbable and bright. The page is open, waiting for what will be written next. And as we drift onward, we may ask, what role do we play in shaping those words, in tending that flame while it lasts? That question waits gently at the horizon, patient as we continue into the unfolding of this fragile story. From the open page of Earth's unfolding future, the imagination drifts outward again into a quieter image, that of a vast library, stretching far beyond sight. Not a library of paper and ink, but of planets, each one a record, a story written in stone and sky. Some books are closed, their stories complete. Others are unfinished, their endings unwritten. And there, on one fragile shelf among countless rows, Earth rests, a volume still open, its pages turning even now. The failed worlds fill these shelves in silence. Venus lies there, its chapter sealed by runaway heat, the script scrawled in acid clouds and lost oceans. Mars holds another, the ink of ancient rivers faded into dry valleys and dust. Mercury's thin, bare pages whisper of a story without shelter, a book stripped of its cover. Farther afield, Titan sits like a mystery manuscript, its surface cloaked in haze, its lakes of methane unreadable to us except in fragments. Europa's story is frozen, but perhaps not finished, its chapters hidden beneath ice, waiting for a reader with patience enough to look deeper. Each of these worlds is an entry In the archive, a record of trial and error, of possibility and loss. None are wasted. Each teaches something about what might have been, about how narrow the margins of habitability truly are. The library does not play favorites. It holds tragedies and wonders alike, preserving them with equal care. And perhaps, in some subtle way, each closed book throws Earth's still open pages into sharper relief. You, drifting now, might picture this library as endless halls lined with shelves that stretch into a dim horizon. On each shelf, a planet rests, its binding made of stone, its ink written in valleys, mountains, atmospheres, and oceans. Some volumes are heavy tomes, filled with long, complex histories before they reached their end. Others are slim, barely, more than pamphlets, worlds where habitability was brief or never began. Together, they form a record of cosmic experiment, an archive of possibilities, failures, and rare survivals. Earth's volume is there among them, but it is not yet closed. Its binding is weathered, marked by impacts and upheavals, but its pages still turn. The script continues, written not only by tectonic plates and shifting climates, but also now by the hands and choices of human beings. Every breath of air, every drop of rain, every flicker of thought is a letter on the page, subtle yet permanent. We do not control the ending, but we are scribes within the story, shaping lines that will remain once our part is finished. There is something humbling in this vision. For in such a library, Earth is not the centerpiece, not the greatest or grandest book. It is one among billions, remarkable not for its size or brilliance, but for the rare fact that its story is still alive. So many others have ended. So many sit closed in silence. To remain open is itself extraordinary. Perhaps this is why, when we look at the stars, we feel an unspoken awe, the awareness that out of a universe filled with closed volumes, we find ourselves inside one that is still being written. And perhaps this metaphor carries a gentle invitation. A library is not just a collection of endings. It is also a place for reflection, learning, and meaning. Each failed world teaches something about fragility, about impermanence, about the razor-thin line between flourishing and silence. When we study Venus, Mars, Titan, or Europa, we are not simply cataloging dead planets. We are reading entries in the archive, notes left by the universe to remind us how precious a continuing story is. The cosmic shelves hold many books we will never read, too distant or too faint to be reached. Yet, their presence can be imagined. Each star in the night sky may be a library branch of its own, filled with shelves of closed stories, shelves of unfinished drafts, shelves of fragile volumes trembling on the edge of possibility. The archive is beyond counting, beyond measure, but not beyond wonder. So close, so fragile, so easily undone. The words echo again, fitting here as much as they did when speaking of Earth's near misses. For every open book, 1,000 are closed. For every surviving story, countless are lost. And yet, the meaning of survival is sharpened by their company. To be one rare book still open among shelves of silence is to carry a responsibility and a gift. When you imagine the library of failed worlds, do not think of dust and despair. Think instead of context, of perspective. The silence of those shelves makes Earth's voice audible. The endings of those stories make Earth's continuation meaningful. The closed bindings remind us that our own book will one day close as well. And that knowledge deepens, rather than diminishes, the worth of every line written now. And when the thought settles, it leaves behind another quiet wondering. What chapter are we in now? Is this a middle page or closer to the end? No one can know. The book is still open, and while it is, the words matter. Soon, we will lean closer into this reflection. Not just the library around us, but the story within us, and the meaning of survival, written line by fragile line. Carrying the thought of Earth's unfinished story onward, another layer begins to unfold. The lessons that fragility itself offers. It might seem, at first, that fragility is a flaw, something to fear, something to overcome. But when we look more closely, when we listen more patiently, fragility reveals itself not as weakness, but as beauty. It is the condition that gives weight to survival and texture to meaning. Without it, there would be no tenderness, no wonder, no reason to pause in reverence at all. Think of a blossom opening in spring. Its petals are delicate, easily bruised by wind, easily scattered by rain. And yet, because it is fragile, it captures attention in a way that stone or steel cannot. Its very vulnerability is what makes it lovely. A blossom that lasted forever would soon fade into the background, unnoticed. But a blossom that lasts only a season becomes unforgettable. Because it is fragile, it matters. The same truth hums through the story of life on Earth. Oceans that could have boiled away, ice ages that nearly smothered all warmth, skies that wavered between poison and shelter. Again and again, existence teetered on the edge. And yet, through that uncertainty, the continuity of life became more precious, not less. If Earth had been a world where survival was guaranteed, then perhaps no one would pause to wonder at it. But because survival was not certain, because the story almost ended many times, its endurance carries meaning. Because it is fragile, it matters. You, drifting now, are part of this same teaching. Human life, too, is delicate. A brief flicker within vast stretches of time. Bodies grow tired, voices fade, moments pass. At first, this might seem sorrowful. Yet, when seen with gentleness, it becomes a source of value. A moment of laughter is treasured because it will not last forever. A shared glance carries weight because it will not return in the same way again. A single breath, drawn in this fragile body, is meaningful because it is not infinite. Because it is fragile, it matters. This paradox, soft but profound, is found everywhere. Mountains endure for ages, yet it is the fragile bloom on their slopes that holds our gaze. Stars burn for billions of years, yet it is the fleeting streak of a meteor across the night that stirs awe. Oceans stretch endlessly, but it is the fragile foam at the edge of the shore that we reach down to touch. Fragility does not diminish beauty, it creates it. And if this is true of blossoms and moments, perhaps it is true of worlds as well. A planet that could not fail, that never faced collapse, would not feel miraculous. It would simply be. But a planet that walks the edge of disaster, that survives against odds, becomes something extraordinary. Perhaps Earth's fragility is not a shadow over its story, but the light within it. Perhaps what makes this planet meaningful is not that it is perfect, but that it is delicate, and that, despite this, it endures. There is comfort in this recognition. It allows fragility to be embraced rather than resisted. To see fragility as weakness is to live in fear of it, but to see fragility as beauty is to live in reverence. You, listening now, may feel the delicate thread of your own life. Know that it is not less because it is fragile. It is more. Because it is fragile, it matters. The repetition settles like a refrain. Because it is fragile, it matters. A flame flickering in the dark, a petal trembling in the wind, a world balanced on the edge of survival. None are diminished by their vulnerability. Each is made luminous by it. And as the thought drifts outward again, it carries a gentle suggestion. Perhaps the universe itself is a vast stage for fragility. Stars collapse, galaxies dissolve, planets falter. Yet in these impermanent patterns, beauty unfolds. If everything lasted forever, there would be no need for wonder. But because everything is fragile, every glance, every note, every life matters. So close, so fragile, so easily undone, and yet so beautiful, precisely because of it. The lesson does not urge fear, but reverence, not despair, but gratitude. Soon we will lean further into this thought, toward what such fragility asks of us, here and now, as caretakers of a story that matters because it almost wasn't. From here, the EBDE story begins to fold back upon itself like the closing of a book whose pages have been slowly and patiently explored. We have wandered through visions of failed worlds and fragile survivals, through frozen deserts and runaway furnaces, through Earth's narrow escapes and the silence of cosmic graveyards. And now, as the long arc of reflection softens, the narration leans not toward urgency, but toward rest. What remains is reassurance, a gentle reminder that while the cosmos is vast and unpredictable, your world is here, alive, and safe for now. Think of Earth, turning quietly beneath the stars. The same fragile atmosphere that once wavered now holds steady around you, offering every breath of air. The same oceans that once nearly boiled away now move in their familiar rhythms, carrying tides to and fro. The same ground that once shook with fire now rests beneath your body, steady and solid. Survival has always been precarious, yet in this moment, it is present. The balance holds. The flame endures. If you are drifting, let yourself drift. The story does not require your full attention any longer. It waits, patient, in the background. What matters now is the comfort of knowing that even in a universe of failures, this small blue world continues. You are not adrift in silence. You are carried on a planet that still turns, still shelters, still breathes. So close, so fragile, so easily undone. And yet, still here. The refrain repeats, not as warning now, but as comfort. Earth's fragility is not a threat, but a reminder of presence. A lullaby written in geology, in oceans, in skies. To recognize that survival is never guaranteed is to feel gratitude that survival is still happening. Right now, with each quiet rotation, each gentle dawn waiting on the horizon. Perhaps you feel small against the scale of galaxies. That smallness, too, can be a gift. To be small is to be light enough to rest. To be brief is to know the sweetness of each passing moment. And to be fragile is to know that what you are part of, this living Earth, is rare and wondrous. There is no rush to hold it all. You need only rest within it. You, listening now, are part of this story. Every breath you take links to balances older than mountains, older than stars. Yet for all that depth of time, your place in it is simple. You are here. You are breathing. You are safe enough in this fragile present to let go and rest. Thy Chufi words can settle now like soft waves, rising and falling in rhythm with your own breath. A field of failed worlds stretches unseen beyond the stars. But your place is here, on one that endures. The universe holds its silence. Earth holds you. That is enough. Sleep well, traveler. The story of Earth continues beyond you, but in this moment, it carries you gently. Sleep well, for the oceans still move, the forests still breathe, and the sky still shelters. Sleep well, for the planet is still turning. And as it turns, it whispers its fragile, precious song. Still here, still alive, still yours to dream within.